I really enjoyed a delightful conversation with Susan Hensel, who is an experienced multidisciplinary artist. She works in a wide range of media, from graphite drawings to digital embroidery. We covered a broad range of topics, from the nature of beauty to the physics of light and how our perception of light changes because of the triangular shape of the polyester threads that she uses in her embroidery. And for anyone who may doubt of their ability to either become an artist or call themselves an artist, Susan does a wonderful job of explaining the process that she went through and the importance of showing up regularly, even if you only have 5 minutes, to build a practice where you develop your competence and your confidence in your work. So here's my conversation with Susan. So excited to speak with you today, Susan. I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to share.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it. It's been a while since I've had an interview.
In a serious career, I have to say,
Yes.
because I did research. You have been working and you've done a lot.
Yes, I have.
I might take you back, though, if I just ask the question to set the stage a little bit around when you first started making art and what it meant to you.
I have probably always been an artist, although I didn't think of myself as an artist as a child. We were exposed. My mother was an amateur artist. She had grown up in Toledo, Ohio in the early aughts of the 20th century, going to the Toledo Museum of Art Children's School. So art was always there in some way. And I was always there in some way, in that I was always drawing, I was painting, I was making messes, I was stacking things up, I was running experiments of various noxious berries and things to feed my dolls. I wanted to stay below that big cedar tree, digging around to figure out where the squirrel went and how I could set up a home for it. That need to assemble and investigate things and look at things closely has always been with me.
I am curious about the doing of things versus calling ourselves something. See, I didn't think of myself as an artist, but I did all those artist kind of things. How do you distinguish those?
Yeah, when did that change? I think it changed really in college. When I got to the end of high school, I knew I had to study art, but I was also a very good academic student. So to hedge my bets, I decided to go to a large university so that if the art school thing didn't work out quite the way I wanted, if I got there and went, oops, I would have a place to go that was still a good education. So I went to University of Michigan, and the first week I was there, I had no question that I was where I was supposed to be able to manipulate materials all day and then read about manipulating materials all day and write about manipulating materials all day. Oh, I was in heaven, just in heaven. So that's when I realized, for real, I was an artist. My key major was in sculpture, and I had a second major in painting, and then I had a minor in ceramics. I graduated basically during the Vietnam era, when once, just like now, the world was blowing up around war and social justice and societal changes. And I wondered what was the point, which many artists have crises about. I mean, I think that's a human crisis that we all get to have. And what I decided made sense was to work in ceramics, which I loved, and to affect people's lives through my output. So the idea that I had that remains today, no matter what media I'm working in, is that I wanted people to be able to slow down enough to become present in their lives. I wanted to make the mugs, the serving pieces, the bowls, the plates that would make the prep cook go, oh, which plate would this food look the best on? So that the person who was eating the food would have a surprise when the food was served and they go, oh, this looks especially good. Why does this look especially good? And when food looks especially good, they can have that slowing down effect, not only of observing, but also of flavor. And then also of community, because all of these things link. So that if you are having a meal with someone else, you're going to be conversing with that person. And it moves on from there. So that whole idea of becoming positively present guides a lot of what I do.
So that's interesting because I can connect that to what I do in my day job a little bit, which is develop workshops for learners.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is getting feedback, right? So you deliver something and you get their feedback and you try to adapt and you make something that's fit for purpose or whatever it is. How do you get feedback, or do you want feedback when you create pieces?
Oh, yeah.
You want somebody to be like, oh, this is the perfect bowl for
whatever. Yeah. The feedback that I got back in those days was from doing art fairs. And Michigan, where I was living at the time, had a robust art fair circuit. And you could actually make a living or close to a living doing that without even having to leave the state at that time. And not only did you have the feedback loop of being paid, but you had the feedback loop of people returning and saying, oh my goodness, I love this work. I got one piece last year and it changed my life. Now I'm more of a gallery and museum artist. And the way I get the feedback loop here, the one that makes me know I'm on the right track, is the openings when I have solo shows. And you will see people absolutely stock still and mesmerized. If you walk up to them and you introduce yourself as the artist, it's like they come out of a trance and they go, oh my goodness. I mean, but how did you do this? What is it? This is doing something to me. So they stop because of a certain sense of confusion, and then they get mesmerized by the beauty, and the whole thing slows them down. And sometimes it's scale, because scale affects these things too. And in this slowing down, they become engaged and they breathe more slowly. And the breaths are deeper and they become calmer. And then we begin to talk about the science that's going on, because there is science going on with what I do now. But there's also, again, learning how to be present and how to use that and how to benefit from that. And not all pieces will do that to all people. And that's utterly okay. And if nobody responds to a piece I particularly like, then of course I know I've missed the boat somehow. And that's good information to know too. And I also get feedback loop through Instagram and Facebook and things like that, of course.
It makes me want to jump ahead to a question I usually reserve for later. That openness, right? So that openness to feedback and wanting to hear what people say when they come and they try things or they tell you through Instagram. So I've been thinking about that idea of vulnerability around it's an openness, right? It's just like receiving this input and responding to it however you want to. So I'm going to throw it back to you maybe and just say, how do you think the idea of vulnerability relates to what you just shared?
There's a certain level of vulnerability or toughness that, yeah, you have to develop over the years. I think about it in a number of ways. There's the kind of vulnerability where you have just ripped your heart open, and you're revealing that. Frankly, I'm not sure the public needs that. I do make work like that. That's for me. If it has something that I think is important that other people would learn from, I will share it. And it's scary, but I will do it. But most of the work that I'm showing now, not all of it, because I do have some of those really vulnerable pieces out there right now. Most of the work that I'm sharing right now is about presence, and that doesn't hurt me if they don't get present. But the other part of this thing, because I believe the work has work to do in the world, obviously I'm going to get rejected a lot. That's just the way it is when you are writing proposals, sending out applications. And I'm not tough, I'm a softie. But the way that you toughen up is you just keep doing it. If you're waiting for one application to respond, you're going to be devastated each time. But if you're waiting for 10, one of them's probably going to say yes. It's sort of the law of quantities. And it's not, for those who are really hurt by these things, as I was at the beginning, of course I was. I look for what that feedback means. And sometimes it means that I chose an opportunity for which I really wasn't appropriate for whatever reason. But also as a curator, as somebody who's owned galleries, there are shows, especially when you're doing a group show, that just kind of come together in ways that are unexpected, and some really spectacular work that you would have loved to say yes to would not have looked right in the show. And I could be a victim of that. And also, because I'm doing work that no one else is doing, I just need to explain it more. And I keep trying to explain what the technology does and does not do. And there's a lot it doesn't do. The technology is just a tool in what I do. Most of what I do is highly intuitive and highly physical. I work in digital embroidery, which has a somewhat mechanical look to it. I use the software and the machinery that is used to make monograms on things and baseball caps, but I make sculpture. So what I'm producing are parts in the embroidery machines that I have designed in the computer that never come out like I think they will, that always get adjusted again. And they are designed to fold, bend, and crumple in ways that change the color interactions. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. And there's a mystery to it. I have a plan going in. It's a loose plan, but it's a plan. And every once in a while, it comes out exactly as planned. There's one over my left shoulder, the sort of pink one in the background here. That one came out exactly as planned. The one next to it, not even remotely. It's just the way it is.
So maybe a piece of that, because I wanted to ask you about being a multidisciplinary artist.
Yeah.
You have explored many different forms of art.
Yeah.
So you've arrived at this, and sometimes it turns out like you planned it, sometimes it doesn't. But what brought you to that form, to do embroidery?
That story is a good one. I live in Minnesota now, which has the largest state fair in the United States. It's not as big as Toronto Expo, but it's big. It's very large.
Did you just say that something in Canada was bigger than something in the United States?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well,
because I've been to the Toronto Expo.
Okay. No pride here, but I'll take that.
Yeah. But this thing is really huge. You cannot see the whole thing in one day. It's a physical impossibility. You could run through the whole thing in one day, but you wouldn't see anything. And part of becoming a local, because I will never be a native, I guess. I moved to the Minneapolis area 20 years ago. And so part of becoming a Minnesotan is you go to the state fair. And I'm used to state fairs that are a bunch of cows and a few quilts. This is a bunch of cows, a whole bunch of quilts, a whole bunch of fine art, a whole bunch of wine, a whole bunch of hot dogs, you name it, they've got it. I went to the fine arts building, as I always do. But one year I decided to go to what I call the demonstration building. And it's where manufacturers demonstrate their new products. So it's like, the Ginzu knives and vacuum food storage, that kind of stuff. And I rounded a corner and there was a sea of sewing machines that were operating without any attention. And one of them was stitching out a rather large Donald Duck, bigger than my head. It was a big Donald Duck. I didn't care that it was hands-free, and I certainly didn't care that it was Donald Duck. But what I cared about was the quality of the blue that was in his shirt. I had never seen a more magnificent, complex, deep, compelling blue in my life. And I knew I was in trouble right then and there. It was like, you just landed in midstream and you are going to turn left, aren't you? And I went, yeah. So I left the fair and started applying for grants to get my first machine, and that didn't come through. So I got my first one needle machine on a 3 years, same as cash loan. And then I did get a grant to get the software to begin to design for it. And it was very difficult. I'm very computer savvy. I've been working with computers since I was about 16. And folks, I'm 73. So I'm very computer savvy, and they don't scare me. They're just tools. And if you screw up, so what? And I mean, that's always kind of been my attitude about most things. It's just stuff. It's just a piece of paper. It's just a wad of thread that got all wrapped around itself.
I have a question, but I was afraid it was a stupid question, so I wasn't going to ask it.
What's that?
It just, when you remarked on the shade of the blue,
yeah,
trying to imagine, does that mean that it was mixing different threads? Because I'm trying to imagine something stitching. I'm like, well, that's just the color of the thread. But then if you say it's
it was one thread. But what I finally learned, and it took me years of study to get here, most of the embroidery done these days is done with polyester thread because it's more color fast, wash fast, all of that. Well, it turns out that the polyester thread has a cross section that's basically triangular. And so what that means is that the light is going to be bouncing off of it in a whole bunch of different directions with different angles. And that is what makes color. So that single blue that they were stitching with made the most ultramarine blue I've ever seen. But what it was actually with one thread was making the blue shade of ultramarine and then sort of the green shade of ultramarine toward the red shade of ultramarine because of the different angles that the light was bouncing on. I work with a very close palette, but I do work with several threads, usually no more than 2 in any area. And I work in gradients, letting the color of the background be one of the colors. And when you walk by, especially the folded pieces, the color shift is so dramatic that you almost believe you're looking at a whole nother embroidery on the other side when they are identical threads. So that's one of the reasons that it's so mesmerizing, is because the brain can't parse how it is that it looks gold, but then I move my head and it looks blue. Why? And it has to do with those threads and their placements, their angles, all of that. But mostly it's physics, the physics of light.
I don't want to be too trite about it, but if I asked you what your work reveals about you, artist and as a person, and I'm thinking about these triangular pieces. And
yeah.
So I will just ask you without trying to.
Well, it does have, I mean, it's most people won't get it, okay? But I know it's there, and it has to do with a philosophy I've developed around color and beauty and the radical power of it. It's a spiritual thing for me. And I am a woman of faith. I tend toward mysticism. And there is a thing that happens when the beauty is so intense that you stop in your tracks and you slow down. It allows you not only to have that kind of deep breath experience, but it also opens you up to be able to have a more empathic and spiritual transcendent experience. And only some people will get that, but that is my experience. And that is what is out there. That is implicit in these things for me. And it doesn't bother me if people get it, but the radical action is still there because of the way, at the very least, the way people have to stop and try to figure out what it is they are seeing and what it is they are feeling in response to it. That's how we lead a life that is more satisfying. So, no, it's not actually a trite question. It's a very deep question.
Well, now I'm curious, you use the word beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that really interesting as far as just thinking about a universal experience. And you said it's not for everybody. So
yeah.
But what does beauty mean to you as far as creating pieces that might evoke that?
Yeah. Part of the philosophy grew out of reading John O'Donohoe's book on beauty. I highly suggest it to anybody. I really do. He was an Irish priest, poet, philosopher, and it's beautiful writing. And he considers what are the elements that constitute beauty from all different points of view. And all of us have certain kinds of things that we respond to. And for the most universal one for most people is getting out in nature. I respond to that too. All of us tend to feel more part of the whole if we're out walking under the trees in the sunshine and shadows. And that is beauty. So beauty is that kind of experience, whether it's aural, visual, tactile, all those sensual embodied experiences that allow you to feel connected somehow to a greater experience of being human in the world. So it isn't necessarily a beautifully painted portrait, although it might be. There might be something about that portrait or that use of paint that does that to me, but it's not because it's a good depiction. It's because there's something else in there.
You've now inspired another jump. For some reason with you, I'm like, I'm taking all
That's okay.
And it's nothing that I actually sent you as a question. So you're being very good about responding to all of these questions completely out of the blue. But so if we think about beauty, and not everybody responds to that,
Right.
How do you feel when you create something and you do put it out in the world? And there may be an essence of beauty about it, but different people are going to respond to it in different ways. And how do you feel when people respond to it in different ways?
I am not the least bit worried about it anymore because I know some people will on most of the work. Some people will. And that's all, you know what, in anything that we make, unless we are strictly commercial artists and there are, you follow whatever the rules are, you got to have the face, she's got to have big lips, all that. And it's pretty. I mean, nothing wrong with it. It just is a different function. Or graphic design. There are certain kinds of graphic design that work to communicate what you need to communicate. I'm working in the gallery arena. It has a different place and it's just a different thing. All I can do, because I do trust in my skills, I trust in my observation, and most things don't go out right away. I have to live with them for a while to make sure that they're ready. All I can do is the best I know how to do and vet it. That's part of what Instagram and Facebook are about too, is that's part of the vetting process on some level. Have friends come in and go, have I missed the boat here? I'm having a hell of a time and there's something missing and I don't know what it is. But also just trust it and just know, okay, it was good for your gut. Because I feel very satisfied when they go out. I feel good.
Do you remember a point in your career where you were like, you arrived at where you just described, which is, I'm good, I put this out, some people are going to respond to it?
I actually think it was only about 10 or 15 years ago.
It takes time.
Yeah, it really does take time. We talk about the practice, and I do think it just takes a tremendous amount of repetition of doing over and over and over again. When you get to the point where you know you have command of your materials and your thoughts, whatever it is you're working on, then you can feel pretty confident that someone will find it compelling in some way. I have been laid up for 10 months, folks. I had a very serious injury 10 months ago, and I am just hobbling back into the studio for the last 4 months or so. I've been here every single day because it's showing up. Now, sometimes I'm getting nothing done other than looking around, sometimes crying, going, I can't do anything. But it takes that kind of commitment. You just show up in the space that you have designated as your studio so that you can get rid of some of the self-doubt that we all have to live with. Am I good enough? Will it be any good? Who the hell cares? It's only paper. It's only paint. It's only thread. I have to remind myself of that. Sometimes as an artist, you feel like what you do is so narcissistic because it feeds us so much. And it turns out that what we do as an artist, as it feeds us, we're able to feed other people.
I am very intrigued by that personally, and just to have your take on it around when we're creating art or we're creating pieces to share. So we're creating things to share with people, and so they can respond to it and probably learn something from their response. How do we deal with that part that's like, but I'm putting something out that's about me. Like, I'm also learning about myself. And so when I put something out there, it's me. So I don't know how to.
Yeah, I really don't know what to say. We make art for ourselves first. The work that we do that is the strongest really is authentic. And that's because it's feeding some need that we have that sometimes we can't identify it. I mean, a lot of us artists like to say, I am a visual artist because words will not serve entirely. And I do encourage people to write about what they're doing because I think it's really important to begin to understand what it is you're doing. I think my narcissism comment had to do with the responses I've gotten so many times over the years about, oh, that's a nice hobby, or, oh, it must be nice to do something so fun all day. Oh, how do you earn a living? Artists don't earn livings? And number one, it's none of their business. But number two, I'm a professional and I am doing something that people have been devoted to doing since before there was written history. Humans, once they more or less were fed, more or less had shelter, as provisional as it might have been, made marks on the wall. And those marks may have been magical. They may have been, early ways to try to bring the food in. Marks on sticks may have been, oh, wow, this stick worked really well to stir the fire. I have to remember this stick. Or it might have been, wait, no, this is my stick. It's got a mark. Or it might have been, this is a magic stick. It's got marks. But we are mark makers, and we make stories to go to these marks. These are authentic and necessary to the human condition. But we are told by our culture that what we do, that we do passionately and with a sense of call and with a sense of urgency, is of no consequence because it cannot be evaluated as a product. Oi. I can get pretty intense on these things after all these years.
I appreciate your time so much today, Susan. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.